Hi, welcome to You,
Me,
and CV. I'm Mike.
I'm Gia.
And today we're going to be talking about the pilot episode of Boy Meets World.
Boy Meets World was created by Michael Jacobs and April Kelly. It premiered on ABC on September 24th, 1993.
It aired for 7 seasons, and all 7 seasons are currently streaming on Hulu. And we always start off by reading the description that they've got on there, so we're going to read that Hulu description. It says, Adolescent Cory Matthews grows up and faces problems with friends, family, and school. What do you think about that description, Gia? Is it accurate? Is it good? Is it exciting?
Accurate, yes. Exciting, no.
It's really not. It's like...
Nouns.
Yeah, right?
They're all problems for Cory.
It's just like...
Give the guy a verb. An adverb, something.
There you go. Yeah, Gia's a writer, so, you know. Yeah, it really sounds boring. Like, it's like,
yeah.
They could have just put literally a boy meets the world, and that would have been more interesting.
Agreed.
Yeah. Also, too, and we'll get into this in the episode, but this is like, I don't want to say this show's like a romance in a way, like a romantic comedy or whatever.
Yeah.
But it kind of is. You know, not in the way that a show like The Mindy Project is like a romantic comedy in sitcom form in some ways, but like it is a romance.
Yeah, I think it was kind of the main TV romance that a lot of people
from our generation.
Yeah, a lot of people from our generation saw. I don't know if that's a good thing.
I don't know either. I don't know about that relationship.
Yeah, but
it doesn't
for
even
better or for worse.
Yeah,
it was.
But it doesn't even mention that in the intro.
Yeah,
like in that
true.
Description, it doesn't even say love. It just says friends, family, and school.
The romantic interest, Cory's romantic interest, is not even in this episode.
Not even in this episode. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, hey guys, welcome to You, Me, and TV. I know I said that already, but welcome. If you're new to this podcast, thank you so much for joining us. And we've got tons of great episodes. You should check all of them out. What we do is we take a look at a first episode of a TV show, and we kind of break it down. We give some backstory on it, some history, and then we go through the episode, and we relate things to our own lives. We analyze it. We talk about a little bit about you, a little bit about me, a little bit about TV.
Hey, that's why it's called You, Me, and TV.
That's why it's called You, Me, and TV. Well,
I just got it.
That's not exactly why it's called that. The real reason is that it's based off of the name You, Me, and Dupree, which is a fantastic movie. I think that also might be on Hulu. Anyway, I've never seen it, but
no one should ever see it. It's terrible.
Who knows? But our fans, of course, are called Dupree. So, shout out to all the Duprees out there. Thanks for listening. Very exciting. And today, like we mentioned, we're going to talk about Boy Meets World, one of our favorites.
Yeah.
I love this show.
Me too.
Pilot episode. Say what?
We grew up with it.
We did grow up with it. This show is like, it's unique in that it has a very specific demographic that aged along with the show, and the show aged as well. So,
although we're about 5-6 years younger,
about 4 years younger, I think, than the characters
character?
are supposed to be, at least.
Yeah, than Cory is.
Right, than Cory, yeah. And so, we're closer to Morgan's age, I suppose.
Yeah, Morgan.
The little sister.
Really. And she's got some really great lines in this episode, and I remember her having really good lines throughout the first few seasons.
No,
she does. She's really funny.
Does?
No, she's funny.
In the first in the whole season?
Yeah.
Maybe in the season. I don't know.
She's
Morgan
funny.
is.
No, because
later on.
They switch actors at one point. I don't like the second Morgan, but the first Morgan is pretty funny.
Your team
She's
first
a very
Morgan.
Little girl. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
They actually, in the 5th season, replaced her with Morgan Freeman.
Oh,
and that was
a big.
It was noticeable.
Change.
It was.
Yeah.
And then he started narrating the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was narrating like Cory. It was similar in some ways to the Wonder Years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the show Boy Meets World gets very experimental toward the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, none of that happens, but it does get very experimental.
It does get very experimental, so it could have happened.
This is a fun show. Less experimental in that pilot, though. Pretty straightforward on what it's doing. But, But yeah, it is targeting that, preteen kid age group. And this, if you maybe if you didn't watch it when it was on, or you watched mostly on Disney Channel or other rerun type of situation, this was smack dab right in the middle of Family Matters and Step by Step, and then also Sabrina the Teenage Witch later on, but in that 8:30 time slot on TGIF.
Yeah.
What a sweet time slot there.
Yeah, and I don't remember too much watching it when it was actually on TGIF. I remember more watching it later when it was airing in reruns on the Disney Channel when it was in syndication.
Yeah.
But I really didn't remember this pilot at all.
I don't remember this pilot in particular. I didn't remember it, but I definitely watched it when it was on. I have vague memories of like Topanga being a total weirdo and of Minkus. The actor Lee Norris, I think, played Minkus there, the nerdy kid. I remember that because Minkus goes away after the first season.
Yeah.
And I really remember watching the second and the rest of it, except for the final season.
And I remember Eric, the oldest brother,
right,
being not super dumb.
Yeah,
he gets the character gets
or does
super
he get
dumb
wiser?
throughout the course
I think
of the show.
he gets wiser. No, but he does play a stereotypical, that archetype, I guess, of a dumb character. But he does have some wisdom though too. It's interesting.
Yeah. But he's not leaning into that so much in the first.
Not yet. Well, he's still young.
Season.
He's only in 10th grade. And Cory, of course, is in 6th grade in this first episode.
Yep.
Let's talk about just some of these actors in here.
Okay.
Like we mentioned, we've got Ben Savage is playing Cory Matthews here.
Yeah,
so,
in Untitled Ben Savage pilot, right? That was the original
that was
title of
like
the show.
the working title. It was the the Untitled Ben Savage project. So we mentioned, I'll get into some of the other actors in a minute, but we mentioned the Wonder Years briefly there. Ben Savage, of course, the younger brother of Fred Savage, who was the star of the Wonder Years, which is what we've done an episode on that too. If you want to check that out, you should check it out. And basically they wanted to do, I don't know, ABC, whatever.
The powers that be.
The powers
the network
that be.
Execs.
Yeah, the network executives. They wanted to do a show featuring Ben Savage. And I was listening to like a panel from it was some kind of Comic-Con where they had a reunion of all the actors from Boy Meets World. And the panel, the person running the panel was asking them what the audition process was like. And Ben Savage was a little bit kind of talking around it a little bit, and Sean jumps in. Ryder Strong jumps in and
Which
is like,
the best name of all time, by the way.
Ryder Strong. It's
yeah,
a really good name. And he was like, what Ben's not telling you is that we all auditioned for something called the Ben Savage Project. He did not audition. So,
but I think you can kind of see why that happened when you watch this, because I mean, obviously, he had the kind of name recognition that came from being Fred Savage's younger brother,
right?
But also, I mean, he's very charismatic. When
he really is.
You enjoy watching this guy.
I think so, yeah. And he does change a lot throughout the series, where he's relatable. Yeah. He gives a different energy in this pilot, I think, than he does later on. It's a fun energy later on, but he's kind of a more socially awkward, anxious character later on. Yeah,
and watching the Boy Meets World pilot a few weeks after we watched, or maybe a few months after we watched the Wonder Years pilot, the one thing I noticed, they don't look so much alike, Ben Savage and Fred Savage. I mean, there's a little bit of a resemblance,
right?
But their voices are super similar when they're like little kids.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you really notice that.
Speaking of the Wonder Years, too, man, let me just tell you, the other night, we were sitting on the front porch here, and we had our tablet out. We had our baby on our lap, and sitting in our little suburban home, we were watching the Wonder Years on Hulu there. Oh, my gosh. What a... just stereotypical suburban. It was beautiful. If you haven't sat outside and wherever you live and watched the Wonder Years, or maybe you live in the country and you want to watch Green Acres, I don't know what is appropriate for you specifically, or Seinfeld in the city. Sit out on a park bench.
Do it.
Do whatever. It's be amongst the TV in the world. Anyway, let me talk about the rest of these actors. That was a good quote that I just said, wasn't it?
That was,
We've also got Will Friedle as Eric, the older brother. We've got...
star of My Date with the President's Daughter.
Oh, yeah?
Which you've never seen. I can't believe you've never seen it.
I've seen First Kid. I've seen Chasing Liberty.
This is better.
How many dating...
This is way better.
Well, that one, the First Kid's not a dating one.
It features a gorgeous...
Will Friedle.
Pink velour dress that I wanted so badly at the time that I saw it.
And you never got it?
I never got it.
Someday.
And I never landed Will Friedle either. So.
Excuse me?
Rough childhood.
Wow. And then we've got Lily Gibson playing Morgan Matthews, at least for a few seasons, you know.
Yep.
William Russ as Alan Matthews, and you were talking earlier, that's the father.
Hot dad.
Hot dad.
Hot dad alert.
Hot dad alert. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Betsy Randall as Amy Matthews, the mom. William Daniels as George Feeney, who was also William Daniels, I believe, was in St. Elsewhere, which I've never really watched.
That sounds about right.
And people, I think people recognized him. I heard that when he was going, into the audition process and everything, that he was hesitant about doing this sitcom, this like children targeted
That's so
sort of
funny,
sitcom.
because I feel like he's so iconic, Mr. Feeney.
He is so iconic, and his acting is so good in this too. He stands out.
He does. I think when we were watching it, I mentioned he reminded me of like Michael Caine in A Muppet Christmas Carol, where Michael Caine is being this very like serious, dignified, like Shakespearean style actor acting with Muppets.
Right. It is a little bit like that.
Not that the other actors are bad.
No,
they're not. I think they're really good.
Ben Savage sort of looks like a Muppet a little bit.
But he seems like he's in like kind of a different class of like I don't know.
A different class of human? Is that what you're going to say? That feels very offensive.
Just everybody else seems more like a comedic actor, maybe.
Yeah,
he seems more...
He's bringing a serious
like a
and
stage actor or
energy.
something.
Yeah. In a good way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, also we've got Ryder Strong playing Sean Hunter. Those are pretty much your main characters in this pilot here.
Yeah.
A couple other characters, though. We've got Nicholas, which is a third friend in this group of Cory and Sean, played by Chauncey Leopardi. What a name right there.
How excited were you to say Chauncey just now?
I love saying the name Chauncey.
Favorite
it feels
name.
good.
I'm glad we didn't have to name our child that. I'm glad you never pushed for that. But I'm surprised because you love, like, whenever you make up a fake name.
It's always
like
Chauncey.
How on Seinfeld they always go with Art Vandelay.
Right.
You go with Chauncey.
Chauncey. I always tell people Chauncey's my middle name when they ask. And
not.
like they believe it. Yeah, no, it's not. But Chauncey Leopardi, you might recognize him. Well, you the viewer, the listener. Well, you might.
The viewer of Boy Meets World.
Yes.
Or the listener to our podcast.
Or the viewer of the movie The Sandlot would recognize him because he is Squints in The Sandlot. He's the one that gets that kiss in the pool there with what's her name? Is it Wendy Peppercorn? Is that what that's from?
Yeah.
So,
and this magic moment plays. And it's
beautiful.
So
but yeah, he's here in this pilot. That's as far as he made it on this. They cut him out, but it is what it is.
He was unnecessary.
And then Danielle Fishel playing Topanga Lawrence. She doesn't appear until the 4th episode, though.
Yeah, she's kind of the Elaine Bennis of Boy Meets World.
She is.
You don't get her in the pilot, but she ends up playing a key role in the series.
She really does.
Yeah.
I feel like they did not foresee any of that going on there. I think she had mentioned that the audition process, well, not the audition process, but there was like a chair and in their sort of setup when they were filming and stuff like that, where they were the person who was playing the role, there'd be a different actor each week that would sit in that chair, and they would no longer be on the show anymore. And she was nervous that she was going to be just there for a week and then gone. But no, she stuck around the whole time.
That's interesting. It's interesting she's not in this episode at all, because the theme of the episode kind of seems to set up
the whole series.
The whole series of which she plays a central role.
It's
we'll get
crazy.
Into that more,
we'll get into it, but if you were to watch this pilot, knowing what this series is about, you would say, wow, I didn't know that they really had this whole thing planned out.
Right, yeah.
But I don't think they did.
No.
So those are pretty much the main people in there. Let's talk a little bit about the development of the show. It's created, we mentioned, by Michael Jacobs and April Kelly. And Michael Jacobs, he had co-created some other shows in the past, and typically he was working with somebody else. It wasn't always April Kelly, but he co-created Charles in Charge. I never watched it.
I didn't either.
But you know what
we
like
talked
about
it a couple weeks ago.
Oh, did we?
Oh no, I'm thinking of Who's the Boss. I get those two mixed up in my head.
Okay, yeah. Well,
never mind.
Scott Baio, and that's in Charles in Charge, right? Wait,
yes.
Yeah, and Tony Danza, they seem to give off a similar vibe. Look.
Italian guys.
Charles in Charge is a show that, like, what comes to your head when you hear Charles in Charge?
What comes to my head?
Yeah.
is an episode of Scrubs
Me
where
too,
Ted's band sings the Charles in Charge song. Really?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Charles in Charge.
I don't know if you've ever seen Scrubs. Ted, the like lawyer for the hospital, this like really dorky guy, he's in an a cappella group. And do they just cover like TV theme songs? I'm not sure.
They might. I don't remember.
But in one episode, they sing the Charles in Charge theme song, and it's beautiful.
It is.
And moving.
Let's rewatch Scrubs sometimes.
Let's do it.
Maybe we'll do that soon.
But yeah,
I think that's
absolutely
on Hulu.
the first thing that comes to my mind whenever I see Charles in Charge. Yeah.
And Michael Jacobs also co-created My Two Dads.
Yeah, which I watched My Two Dads. I enjoyed it. I feel like we've talked about that before on the podcast, but I don't know why.
Well, we often talk about Step by Step, and Dana from Step by Step is in it.
Yeah, she's also the star of My Two Dads. She's not one of the dads. She's the girl who has the two dads.
Literally nobody thought she was one of the dads.
Dana is sometimes a man's name.
Oh, you know what it is?
Yeah.
The head of UFC, which is, people fighting. That's very tough. Although they have women in it too, of course. But his name is Dana White. So
there you go.
Hey, there you go. Anyway, I don't know if head of UFC, I don't know if that's the right term or not, but anyway, he also co-created Dinosaurs. What?
Which we also talked about that on our Arrested Development episode.
Oh, because Lucille is also Fran Sinclair. There you go.
It all comes together.
It really does. But that's why you got to listen to all the episodes. You got to
really
go
do.
back.
Listen.
Yeah. And I don't have this in my notes here, but he didn't create it, but he developed. I don't really know the difference there. I'm assuming they're developing maybe from something, or I don't know. But he developed, wait for it, the Torkelsons.
Like original Torkelsons or Almost Home?
Almost Home is just the second season of the Torkelsons. If you're not familiar with the Torkelsons, it's a show that I don't know what channel it aired on. I know I reran on Disney Channel.
Yeah, I watched it on Disney Channel.
It's got Brittany Murphy in it.
No, that was Almost Home.
Oh, so that was in the second season?
The second season, but it was like a spin-off, and
anyway,
like two of the children were gone and never spoken of again.
It's so weird, but we're talking about Torkelsons too much right here. But let me just say that this one time I don't know how, we were just searching.
Are you gonna talk about the shirt?
Yes, I'm talking about the shirt. We were searching, I don't know, we were just searching old TV shows or something like that, and I think I searched the Torkelsons on like a Google image search.
Yeah.
And this T-shirt came up as in the Google image search, a shirt you could buy.
Yeah.
And it said, had three big check boxes, sort of. And, there's an empty check box, and next to it said single. So not checked off.
Right.
Not single.
All
right.
So it's like a relationship status T-shirt.
Exactly.
Because you want to display that on your body.
You got to let that out there. You got to let people know. You got to display with your body if you're available.
Show your wares.
Exactly. Anyway, the second check box, if you're not single, you're in a relationship, right? Taken. Mm-hmm. Also not checked off.
Right. Okay.
Now we've come to this.
So we're in a gray area.
So now we've got a T-shirt here.
We've established a gray area.
Right.
What could that be?
Right. I've searched the Torkelsons. I'm seeing a T-shirt amongst pictures of the Torkelsons. It's in there. This third box, it's checked off. This is our relationship status right here. This third one.
Okay.
Too busy watching the Torkelsons. That third box said too busy watching the Torkelsons.
Too busy to be in a relationship.
Exactly.
Because you're watching the Torkelsons. Also too busy to be single.
Too busy to be single.
The Torkelsons.
Now, I did find later that you can almost search any show and you can find that same shirt, but my goodness, it caught me off guard. And I have not bought that shirt, and so if anybody wants to buy it and send it to us, we'll give you our P.O. box or whatever it takes.
DM us. Yeah. Hit us up on Insta. Yeah.
There you go.
I feel like we've gotten off course.
Well, we've been talking about the Torkelsons for a while, and let's get back to Michael Jacobs, co-creator of Boy Meets World.
Oh, right. That's what we're talking about.
Let me talk a little bit about sort of his idea behind it. So I'm going to read a quote from him. It says, all of the shows that we had seen, like Family Ties and Growing Pains, where you would focus on the oldest character, Michael J. Fox or Kirk Cameron, the template that was currently on the air, and you do an iconic episode like that character's first date. So what if we did a different structure? What if we took a middle child, and instead of focusing on the first date aspect of the older child, he was looking at it as a betrayal, which is what we did in the pilot when Eric went on his first date and took a girl to a baseball game instead of Corey. And I think that's a cool and unique way of looking at it, because this show, this show is not like a a Full House where the focus is on the whole family or anything like that.
Yeah, this is not focused on the family.
And it's not a focus on, it's not like the Brady Bunch where we're looking at, everybody and different characters having their little side stories and whatnot.
What if the Brady Bunch was just about Jan Brady?
They just call it Jan.
Focus on just Jan.
Just Jan. I would watch it.
I don't think I would.
I would not
to be
watch
honest
it.
with you.
You know what I love though is the Brady Bunch movie, but I'm not going to get sidetracked again by great things from the 90s.
Maybe we'll set up a Patreon and we'll do the Brady Bunch movie.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Who knows? Anyway, we mentioned we were talking about how Will Friedle plays that older brother, Eric. One fun fact that I learned when researching this too is that there is an unaired pilot somewhere where there's a different actor in the role of Eric. They had to replace him. He wasn't tall enough. He didn't look enough like an older brother.
That makes sense.
Because height is how you gauge age.
Right. But Eric is really good. It's hard to imagine the show without him.
He's perfect. He changes so much throughout the series,
and I
too.
thought he was, when I was a little kid, I thought he was really hot.
Oh, yeah?
I did, yeah.
Early Eric or later Eric? Because I like later Eric better.
No, I like early Eric. He started getting a little chubby.
Oh,
and
he did a little bit.
A little dumb for my taste.
Oh man, you don't like Plays with Squirrels version of Eric?
No,
Do you know that reference?
Yes, I do. Yeah. No, I liked him in the earlier seasons when he was like a cool guy, and how he had that hair. Oh,
I like him when he's dumb. He's more of the Joey from Friends kind of archetype there.
That's true. Yeah. But the unaired pilot you mentioned, do we know the plot of that episode? Is it?
I think it's all the same.
Plot?
I think it's all the same.
Okay.
I believe there might be a different actor playing the dad role as well.
Okay. Oh, so it's like that pilot of Full House that we talked about on our Full House episode, where it's the same thing but different actors.
Yeah. And you know what? Let's get into this episode. I'm going to read the description for the episode itself for this pilot, and it says, "Love is a many confusing thing for 11-year-old Cory Matthews, especially when his teacher, who lives next door, insists that Cory study romance." Interesting.
Yeah, so that's like we were talking about. So love is the theme of the episode. And love is the theme of the whole series, I think. But the main love interest, Topanga, is not in this pilot.
Very
That's so
interesting.
Weird.
You know what also is weird? I'm almost 100% sure I copied and pasted this directly from Hulu. I don't know if you're able to look this up right now while I'm doing this, but they spelled Cory 2 different ways in this opening, in this description. And now I'm curious, but we'll figure it out. But they spelled it with an E and without the E. So as Gia looks that up, I'm going to start giving you the opening of the of the episode here. So if you scroll down a little bit there, Gia, that episode, keep going. Oh, it's season 1. Oh, there we go. Pilot. Do they spell it 2 different ways?
Yeah, they do.
What the heck? They spell it 2 different ways?
First snowy, second mention, an E.
That is weird.
Guys. Get your shit together. You're never going to catch up to Netflix.
That is true. This. Hulu.
Disney Plus is coming?
That's true. And
my God,
I actually
what are you
did hear.
Do?
I know. I did hear that when Disney Plus does come out next year, which is Disney's streaming service, that they're going to have Boy Meets World on there too. So watch it while you can on Hulu.
Yeah.
And if not, watch it later on.
Yeah.
Anyway. The show opens. We got the cold open here before the opening music and everything like that. It opens up at a middle school cafeteria. It's before school, and we see Cory, a 6th grade student. He approaches his, he's talking to his teacher, Mr. Feeney, and they're kind of in a cafeteria type of area.
Now already I've got an issue.
Okay.
Do you remember before school and middle school hanging out in the cafeteria, or do you remember getting off the bus and scrambling to get to your class in time? Because that's what I remember. Well,
actually, when I was in 6th grade, I think when we got off the bus, they brought us all into the auditorium, and we had to sit there until like the first bell rang.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe this is a situation like that where they bring them to the cafeteria.
And I think when I was in 7th and 8th grade, they took us to the gym.
Well, was it just a free-for-all, or were you sitting like in a line for your homeroom?
I think it was a free-for-all.
Really?
Well, I think you had to sit down, but it was like you kind of came in with your bus and you sat down. Yeah.
I guess I went to a really restrictive school district.
You must have.
Yeah.
You must have.
That sounds like fun.
It was just annoying because we were just there early. Anyway, Mr. Feeney is giving Cory a hard time because he's getting a candy bar out of the vending machine right there in the morning.
Yeah. Mr. Feeney's a teacher.
Yes.
If you don't know.
Right.
But of course you know, because Mr. Feeney, as we mentioned, is iconic.
Yes. And, they're kind of having a little back and forth right there about that. There's some line about how... you know what? There's just some little banter there in the beginning. One thing I think is funny though is after Cory gets done talking to Mr. Feeney, he glances at the camera as he walks by.
Like he's Jim from The Office.
I don't know if it's not like that. It's not like
he's not like giving a silly.
It's
look
more like did we do it good on this take kind of look. Are we good? Do I keep walking now? So it's real quick, but I enjoy it. Anyway. Cory goes to sit down at a table with Sean and Nicholas. Nicholas, again, squints from
you don't need
the
to remember
Sandlot.
Nicholas.
You don't. But the three of them notice that Mr. Feeney is talking to a new teacher. He's sitting over talking to a new teacher, and she's older. I mean, close in age to him, a little younger than him probably, but and they're talking, and
because Mr. Feeney is an older man. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And that'll come back to be important there. And then this next part, they're just kind of they're bantering. They're talking about how late they stayed up the night before. It took me a few times to understand what the heck they were talking about, but you said you got it on the first time.
I did.
I'm going to read the line there.
Okay.
We've got Nicholas says to Cory, okay, so how late did you stay up last night? And Cory says, monologue. And Nicholas says, monologue, first guest. And Sean says, monologue, first guest, bad sketch. And then Cory, monologue, first guest, bad sketch, funny zoo animal. Nicholas, monologue, first guest, bad sketch, funny zoo animal. Steve Lawrence. And then Cory says, whoa. And Sean says, Steve Lawrence. And Nicholas nods. And then the bell rings. And I was so confused.
I wasn't confused because the word monologue, I associate that with one thing, and that is late night talk shows, like The Late Show or what's the other one? The Tonight Show. Probably The Tonight Show is probably what they're talking about.
I don't know. I tried to look up Steve Lawrence. I don't know who that is. I think he's a musician, and I think the idea was that he stayed up.
He was a comedian.
I guess it could be a comedian or a musician. I thought the idea though was that they got to the musical guest or whatever. So which is the whole thing. So which that is very late. That means these kids are staying up till like 12:35.
Right.
And when I first read it, I thought, is that Saturday Night Live, like monologue? But that wouldn't make sense because that would be on Saturday.
Right.
No, but it's a weird. It's kind of a funny banter there, I guess.
Funny.
But
and it's like they're bragging about how late they stayed up.
That's such a teenage kind of boy thing.
And I wonder what was going on. Was it like how long their parents let them stay up, or was it how long until they fell asleep? What are they bragging about?
That's a good point. I bet it's how long their parents let them, because I feel like these kids would stay up as late as they could.
Yeah, that's true.
Or whatever. Anyway, then we get the opening sequence. I have in my notes here, music, not good.
Dude, because the opening of Boy Meets World changes a lot. Like I don't know if every season, but there's like several.
It changes. There's like at least 4 different sorts of openings. So the music.
And this is not the best one.
Yeah, if you go back and you watch this. First off, if you go back to watch Boy Meets World on Hulu, you don't want to watch the first season anyway. You want to start the second season, but...
I don't know about that. As I said, Morgan has some good lines. Eric is at his hottest.
Okay.
The dad, also very hot. I mean, I'm okay with it.
All right, but anyway, that music, it's like... And there's all these like 90s looking graphics of things like baseballs and paper airplanes and all that.
You forgot the part that's like dun 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 dun.
There's a fun slower part where Cory is dancing, and it's
like a vaudeville type music and dance routine that he's doing in the clip that they're coupling with it. It's very bizarre. I find it fascinating personally.
Well, all right.
And I'm here for it.
Good. Well, we'll have to check it out, or you'll have to check it out, you, the viewer.
Yeah, we already checked it out.
We checked it out many times.
That's what this podcast is about, in case you weren't paying attention.
This is true. But we talked about how there are some different openings. So I think I don't know. I don't have the breakdown of which seasons were which, but...
Do you have a favorite?
Well, let's go through. What's your favorite?
Mine is the one where they're just I don't think there are any words to the song. It's just like the tune to the song.
Where they're in the car, and it's like,
yeah, and it was like, that was like, I would watch that and be like, oh, that's what I want my life to be like. It's so cool. They're just hanging out with all their friends and their boyfriends, and it's just, they're the coolest people ever.
I think that one, that might be my favorite. See, I like that one a lot. I think I like the boldness of, so normally shows, they will cut back on the openings as they go forward.
That's true.
And I like the boldness of the last like 2 seasons that they're just like, we're going to have a theme song. It's going to have words, and it's going to be like real in your face. And it's just going to go, oh, when this boy meets world, a boy meets world. That's like it's so weird that they did that.
I have to ask, I don't know the answer. Is it Joey Lawrence singing the song at that point? Because it's like,
no, I don't know. He's not. I looked it up. It's like some band or something like that.
Later on in the series, Matthew Lawrence, the middle Lawrence brother, joins the cast of Boy Meets World.
A great addition to the cast.
Yeah, he's also a star of the show Brotherly Love, which is also great.
Great show. I think we mentioned it on the podcast
and
before.
His real life brother Joey Lawrence does the theme song for that. So I kind of thought maybe he was doing.
I don't think, and that's not really his style. He sings more like this.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if anyone follows Joey Lawrence, the oldest Lawrence brother, on Instagram.
Is he still hot?
I do. Yeah, still hot. Bald, though. I'm not sure about that choice.
Okay.
But he is aggressively lobbying to play the new Batman. I don't really know if it's a joke or
I think they already
if he
cast
sincerely
that.
wants
I think
to
they
play
cast somebody, but you never know. They can always make a second one.
Posting about how he wants to be Batman,
and
you know what? Let him have this.
Let him have this.
We let Ben Affleck do it for some reason.
And I'd say Joey Lawrence is on his level for sure.
Yeah,
so
he looks great.
He does.
He's fantastic. Just give it to him.
So I think my the final couple seasons, I like that one the best. And then of course there's the in between, after like the first season, there's just like a little guitar riff with like a little cartoon of Cory in the corner like kicking over a world or something.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
I always thought it was weird that they didn't have an opening sequence when I was a kid, and I didn't even know that first season had one because I didn't really watch the first season, I guess, or at least I didn't watch it closely. Too cool for it. Okay.
Too busy watching the Torkelson.
Well, around that time. Anyway, the first real scene then after that opening, we're in Mr. Feeney's class. We've got some students in the front of the class performing Romeo and Juliet, and we've got Cory listening to a baseball game in his earbud, which his earbud looked like a 2006 era earbud. You can't
really see it. It
was really hidden there.
Also, like, just a side note here, I think we established in that opening scene that Mr. Feeney is their teacher all day long, right? For like all subjects. So it's not just like English like
not
they're doing
the typical
right now.
6th grade setup here.
No, it wasn't my setup.
No.
In 6th grade, that's when we started changing classes and having different teachers for everything.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of weird to me. I don't know if that's
I always thought when they said,
places.
because we were paying attention to see like what grade is he supposed to be in here, because I thought that he was in like 5th grade in like elementary school, because he's in high school in the next season, although he's only in 7th grade. You know, it's I think it's all in one building or something.
Yeah, I feel like they're taking artistic license with the grades here.
I think so. Well, and also with lessons and stuff, as the show is notorious for just teaching, you know, just tying things in with whatever book they're reading. And it's like, are they really reading this book in class? Yeah.
So anyway, in this scene, Mr. Feeney is teaching them English. He's teaching them Romeo and Juliet. But he also teaches them all the different subjects and also all of life's lessons.
He does.
He does a lot.
You know, we gotta. A lot. Educators are the backbone of society. I've always said that. I don't.
You've said that as an educator.
Yes. Anyway, Mr. Feeney disciplines Cory for listening to the baseball game there in his earbud.
Oh, by the way, our son, our 1-year-old son, was watching this with us when we were watching it.
Yeah.
And there's at the point where Cory's like listening to the baseball game in his headphone, which by the way sounds like the most boring thing ever to not watch a sports game but to listen to it. I don't know why people do that. Anyway,
do you want to laugh at the part in the line here where he laughed?
Okay.
I think
where our baby laughed?
Yeah.
Okay,
but you have to laugh like a baby.
I'm going to try.
Okay. So Cory stands up and he says, Mr. Feeney, who cares about some guy who killed himself over some dumb girl? Feeney shakes his head and paces toward Cory and says, the tragedy here, Mr. Matthews, is not about a dumb girl or the boy who kills himself because of her. It's about the all-consuming power of love and the inevitability of its influence on each of our lives. Cory looks at him with confusion and says, are you aware that I'm 11 years old? That is not how our baby sounds.
Well, he has a very big laugh for a baby. He thought that was hilarious.
He did think it was hilarious. And then Feeney says, are you aware that you have detention Friday afternoon? Which sets up some parts of the plot there. But our baby did find that to be hilarious.
He did. It was so cute.
It was so cute. Now, he's a baby. I don't know how much he understands of it. And also, there's a laugh track going on. But it was very adorable.
Very cute. He laughs at like random things in shows, and I'm like not sure why he's laughing.
I don't exactly.
But it's adorable.
Yeah. But I have in my notes here, I wrote that the introduction of young love and Romeo and Juliet in the pilot is interesting given the direction the show eventually goes, and the fact that Topanga does not even appear until episode 4. And we kind of touched on that earlier, but this idea of Romeo and Juliet, Romeo and Juliet too, if you're not like an English teacher or somebody who watched the movie Romeo and Juliet, how many times, Gia? Thousands.
That's a conservative estimate.
All right. But
I'm a big Leonardo DiCaprio fan, or at least I was in middle school.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know.
There you go. It's about love. It's about feuding families and stuff like that. But a big part of the plot too is that they're like 14 years old too.
Yeah.
Like they're like children. This whole thing is about people falling in love at such a young age and staying together. So
it's interesting. I just now thought of this. The actress who plays Juliet in the like 1960s Franco Zeffirelli version of Romeo and Juliet, Olivia Hussey. She's actually in a later episode of Boy Meets World.
Who does she play?
She plays Topanga's aunt.
Okay.
That like Topanga goes to stay with because her parents have moved away.
In Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And like Topanga wants to stay in town with Cory. So it's like the very Romeo and Juliet plot.
Oh my gosh.
So this is like an ongoing theme.
This is a good show.
It is.
It really is.
It is.
The next scene in the Matthews home here, we've got Cory and Eric in their bedroom. They share a bedroom. And we've got here a classic two characters talking to each other but having different conversations scene. Because Eric, he's alone in the room. He's on the phone and he says, "You will? Okay, great. Yeah, me too. All right, okay. Bye." And then he goes, "Yes!" And that's as Cory is entering. Now, we know, and we'll find out, and we can tell kind of that he just confirmed that he's going on a date. So Cory comes in the room, and he's also saying, "Yes, Phillies won." That's the Philadelphia Phillies, the baseball team. 8-3. And Eric says, "I'm going out with Heather Ralston." And they give each other high fives. And Cory says, "You know what that means?" And Eric says, "It means every guy in the 10th grade wants to be me." And Cory says, "It means if they win Friday night that they're in the playoffs." And then Eric, realizing they're talking about two different things here, says, "Look, Cory, we got to talk about something." And that introduces this conflict here that Eric has to cancel his plans to go to the Phillies game with Cory so that he can go on his date. And he's actually going to take his date to the Phillies game, which that sucks.
That sucks for who? For
Cory?
Yeah.
Well, I guess you might think it sucks for the date too, that they're going to a baseball game.
I mean, if I had to go to some kind of sports game, is it weird that I call them sports games?
It's a little weird, yeah.
I mean, baseball would be my number one choice, but that's like after we've exhausted all other options.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the next scene, Cory's he's upset, so he runs downstairs to tell the family.
That he's been betrayed by Eric.
Which I actually do feel like a lot of parents probably would say, "Look, you made plans with your brother. You're going to the game with your brother. You're not taking a date to this game." I
was actually really, I guess, impressed with the parents on this show for being on Eric's side of this situation, which we see that they are, like realizing, it seems like the parents realize, okay, Eric could do anything with Cory at any point, but he's got an opportunity to go on this date.
Yeah, I think it's
good for Eric.
There was it comes just a little bit later. There's some other lines in here, but when Eric finally comes downstairs to he's really happy. He the mom is like really happy for him. She's like, she said yes.
Yeah.
And so that's really cool, I think. Supportive.
And I think that kind of gives you a sense of like how the parents are on this show, that they're kind of like hip.
Yeah, they're hip. Well, you can tell by how hot they are too.
Right. They're like more attractive than the parents on a lot of shows are, and they seem to kind of understand like a young kid's romance perspective. So I think that does tell you a lot about how the parents are on this show.
And the parents too, this show I think does a good job. I can't remember really if the mom, I guess, develops as a character in any kind of deep way, but the dad does. He has like a whole like story arc and stuff like that. And the mom is a really good character as well. I don't know if she has any sort of story arcs in that kind of way, but the dad does. They do a good job of that. I think is interesting. But anyway, back to where we're at here. As Cory's in the living room, he's complaining, and he says to his mom, we have a major problem. And his mom says, you have detention with Mr. Feeney. And Cory says, how could you possibly know that? And then the mom says, he stuck his head over the fence and told me while I was bringing the groceries. Which
so
sets
now
it up.
We've established that Cory lives next door to his teacher, Mr. Feeney.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That would
Life
be...
is rough for Cory,
Well,
right?
at least it's only his 6th grade teacher and not also his teacher for the next 10 years.
Oh, and beyond, because he's his teacher even when he goes off to college.
That's true. What a fun thing they do having him. They poke fun at it later on, though, in the series, which is fun, about how he's their teacher their entire school life.
Where do they live? They live outside of Philadelphia?
Philadelphia.
And I guess Philadelphia is a very small town.
That's what I hear.
I've been there. It's not. It's not.
And one thing I noticed in this scene, though, the family looks like they're very coordinated in their outfits. It looks like when you see
Destiny's Child.
A little bit like Destiny's Child, yeah. Or like when you see like those family pictures where everybody's outside, you got the big family, and they're all like they're not wearing the same outfit, but they're wearing very similar outfits.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed about the family, especially when they're all dressed in this similar attire, as you mentioned, is they kind of look like a family. Like I could see them as a real life family, except for Cory.
Well,
like the parents and like the older brother Eric and then the young daughter Morgan. Like if you saw a picture of just the 4 of them, it would be like, yeah, I believe these people as a family. But then you kind of throw in Cory and it's like, oh, what happened there?
Cory does stand out a little bit, although I wonder what that original actor that played the dad looked like, because I feel like Cory has a similar hair to the dad in a way. I feel like the dad looks like he's got thick, curly hair. I mean, his is cooler looking, and it's not as
Cory's hair is like darker and curlier than anybody else's.
Yeah.
Everybody else is kind of like blonde or like light brown hair.
I mentioned before.
And everybody else is like pretty attractive, and Cory is... I mean,
why you gotta do him like that?
I mean, Cory's like 11 years old. It's not like he's unattractive here, but it's not like you would see him and be like, oh, that's the hot guy.
Wow.
Whereas like you would say that about like Eric or about the older brother or about the dad, and you would maybe say some more things about the mom. But
they even use it for a storyline in a later episode as I remember he talks about how his nose is like the size of his entire face.
Yeah, he just like... It's not like he's unattractive, but it does look like he like doesn't look like the rest of the family so much.
One thing too that doesn't look like the rest of the family is Morgan's outfit does not match everybody's, but she'll be replaced. Anyway, Cory thinks it's unfair that Eric can just change the plans to go with anyone else to the game. And the dad says, Cory, he paid for those tickets with his own money. He can take whoever he likes. And Cory replies and says, but I earned those tickets. I slept with him for 11 years.
That line has not aged well.
Does not age well at all. No, of course they're talking about they share a bedroom.
Yeah, but I don't know if they were going for a joke there or not.
I don't think they were. But anytime you're saying I earned something because I slept with someone, you're in a gray area that you don't want to be in.
Not working well in 2019, but yeah, that's what he said. And I don't know if we mentioned before, but like the reason Cory is so invested in this particular game is like the Phillies won this one, and so if they win the next game, which is the one they're about to go to on Friday,
then they'll be in the playoffs.
So it's like
it's
the
a
biggest
big
game of the year.
Yeah,
but also I think Cory mostly is just excited to be going with his big brother.
I think
that's
so
what's
as well.
like really important to him.
Yeah. All right. The next scene here, we are at lunch at the school, and Cory is talking to his friends, and he's saying that he's planning on going to the game anyway. It's sold out, by the way, and he thinks they'll go and buy tickets and go there. Go there with his friends, get some tickets from some scalpers or whatever, which I never understand. If anybody can explain how these scalpers work. I know that scalping is like illegal, right? That's like reselling it for more.
Within a certain amount of feet from the venue, I think.
I don't understand it at all. I remember there's an episode of like Home Improvement or something where they scalp tickets and they end up in jail.
It seems like a very like low-level crime that maybe the police could like maybe work on some homicides or
are there that many homicides?
Violence, or there's a lot of violence.
I don't know.
There's a lot of violence out there. I think they could spend a little less time prosecuting or investigating scalping.
Well,
concerns.
I don't think they do because there's always people out there. I used to go to concerts all the time, and they would be like these no-name like pop punk bands, and there'd always be like people outside, like older dudes, and they're just like, tickets, you guys got tickets for this show, and they're trying to buy the tickets, and it's like, well, you're not going to see this band, but I know they're reselling them, but it's all very silly. Anyway, enough about that. Let's get into this here. Anyway, they point out that the friends point out that Cory's got detention Friday, so he's not going to that game, and so Cory decides he's going to try to smooth talk his way out of detention by going up to Feeney and trying to, talk his way out of it. I'm not sure why Feeney is eating lunch in the cafeteria, sort of amongst the students.
He does a lot of work. This guy deserves all the raises.
This is true.
When they talk about teachers being like underappreciated and underpaid, they're thinking of Mr. Feeney.
There you go.
He does so much.
But they sort of start to continue to build this, this budding romance between Mr. Feeney and this new teacher. Her name is Evelyn, by the way.
Oh, of course it is.
But she comes to sit down next to Mr. Feeney, and Feeney kind of shoos Cory away. Next scene, we've got Cory. He's in his treehouse now. It's nighttime. I didn't mention before in the last scene, he talked about how he is... He's an orphan now. He's moved out of the house because his family has all abandoned him. His older brothers abandoned him, and then his parents took his older brother's side, and so he's living in the treehouse now.
So that's really interesting. It's similar to the plot of another pilot we watched, which was the Full House pilot, where DJ, who I think is like a similar age to Cory, like middle school age, also moves out of the house. She moves into the garage because she's upset with her family. Because they've
taken her room.
Right. So it's a similar
Of course, she had a lot more going on. And
a lot
probably more justified anger there.
Yeah.
And issues to deal with.
But I guess this is like a thing with preteens. They just...
they get angry. They want to move out. Yeah. Did you ever try to move out of your house?
I didn't have a tree house to move into.
I did not have a tree house either.
No, and I couldn't move into the garage. Too many bugs. So
there you go.
I was stuck.
Anyway, when Cory is in the tree house there, he's eating some dinner that his mom brought for him, but he's noticing that he can see into his neighbor Mr. Feeney's window, and he sees Mr. Feeney is setting up a candlelit dinner for two. Yeah. And then and he's kind of like, oh, America's funniest home teacher or something like that. Then Mr. Feeney gets a phone call. And sort of has a sad look on his face and talks for a minute, hangs up the phone, and then he puts away one of the plates, and then he eats all by himself as Cory eats all by himself in the window. And I think that's a cool moment there.
Yeah,
where,
it's very poignant.
Yeah, and you see that, this could easily be this is the plot of just an episode where the teacher and the student are connecting in this interesting way, but it's not. It's setting up, that this is the relationship here. It's a family sitcom, but it really focuses a lot on this kid and his friends and their relationship with this teacher.
Yeah, and Cory coming to see the teacher as like an actual person and not just a teacher is a big theme, because I think I know whenever I run into one of my teachers outside of school, it's always like, oh, weird, you exist outside of school. You kind of have been on the other end of that as a teacher yourself.
running into students or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
It's a little weird.
It's a little weird. Also, let me tell you, if I ever see a student outside of school, like there's a whole like a context here. Like if I see them outside of school, I do not recognize them.
Oh yeah.
It's happened before where I've been like, I mean, I kind of recognize them, but not really. Like where it was definitely a former student that was serving me ice cream at this ice cream place, and I just like did not acknowledge that I knew them at all because I just couldn't tell.
Yeah, but I think that's really interesting with Boy Meets World because a lot of you might know this, but there's a spin-off to Boy Meets World that happens, like 20 years after the series
close
ends?
to that, more
Close
like 15 years.
15 years. Girl Meets World,
right.
which follows the life of Cory's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And in that show, Cory is a teacher.
There you go.
So it's almost like he becomes Mr. Feeney. So that I think makes the interaction between the two characters and the kind of recognition of Mr. Feeney's humanity by Cory even more poignant.
I think so.
When we know that what Cory goes on to become.
There you go. Now you don't want to be too close to your teacher, though, as we saw in an episode we were watching earlier tonight, because we wanted to watch the one that has Fred Savage in it. So there's an episode like in the 5th or 6th season where Fred Savage is playing their college professor, and
which we mentioned when we did our Wonder Years episode.
Yeah, and he is a shady
real
dude.
shady.
Look, I don't want to get too into that episode.
episode.
It's upsetting, but this whole, if you've never watched Boy Meets World, check it out. But if you've seen Boy Meets World, go back and watch all these on Hulu, man. They're fantastic.
And if you want to see a less upsetting sort of crossover between Savage Brother TV shows, you can watch season 3 episode 14 of The Wonder Years, where Ben Savage, prior to his being on Boy Meets World, is on The Wonder Years.
There you go.
It'll traumatize you less.
Also, Savage Brothers TV shows is the new name of my new indie rock band.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. So after Cory sees Mr. Feeney eating alone, we see the next day at the Matthews house.
I'm going to backtrack real quick.
Right.
And there was just my favorite line, I think, of the episode was in this scene, and we kind of glossed over it. So when Cory has moved into the treehouse, his mom brings him, she brings him some food and stuff.
Here's
Yeah. And then she says,
because it's a home, it's a housewarming in a way.
Yeah, she's like, I would have brought you a plant, but we're in a tree, so...
Gosh,
I thought that was really funny.
They're hot. They're funny. My gosh.
Yeah. I just really liked that, so I wanted to mention it.
We can only aspire to be such parents.
Right.
But
anyway, moving on to the next scene.
Cory is sneaking back into the house on the next day to get some fresh clothes. He has a conversation where he talks about feeling abandoned by Eric. He has that conversation with his mom, because that earlier scene, it does kind of seem, it doesn't seem like it, but you could look at it as the parents just writing off Cory's feelings and being like, look, Eric can do whatever he wants. Sorry, pal. But they have a moment here, and that kind of, it's a well-written pilot. I like it. In this moment here, the mom says, you still feeling a little abandoned, Cor? And he says, yeah, well, life goes on. And she says, yeah, that's what your dad said when it happened to him. And Cory says, why? Who abandoned Dad? And the mom says, you did. And he says, I never did anything like this to Dad. And then the mom says, oh, when you were little, you couldn't wait for your dad to get home from work so you could throw the football around with him. I'll tell you something. He looked forward to it as much as you did. And then they go on to say, what happened, well, you got older and, you were doing your own thing. But then she says, too, of course, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just what happens.
And the cats in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man in the moon. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Very, very poignant moment here.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Now, I will say, though, the whole tone of this pilot is not maybe what you expect from Boy Meets World, but the content, it's good.
It's good.
Yeah.
And we talked a little about this while we were watching it. But it's much more watchable to us than shows, current kids shows.
Oh, current kids shows are
including
too intense.
Girl Meets World.
Yeah, they're too abrasive.
They're very obnoxious. Lots of really bright colors and just lots of junk on the screen all the time. Lots of stuff and everywhere.
Right.
And but this does feel very moving. And
I think so.
Everybody's kind of acting like a realistic person. I feel like.
Yeah.
And it's just nice. It's a nice family show.
It is. So now the next part, it's now Friday. It's after school. Cory's in detention. He's the only one in detention.
I noticed that too. That's weird, right?
It's a little weird.
Because his only offense was listening to a baseball program while in baseball broadcast, a baseball.
He was listening to the radio, and it was a baseball game that was playing. Yes, he was listening to a baseball program.
It doesn't sound like the worst thing you could do, but apparently it was the worst thing that anyone at his school did that week or that day.
You know, though, that's not quite what it is, and we'll get to it, though. But he's trying to teach him a lesson. He's not disciplining him.
Because that's another thing. The person he has detention with is Mr. Feeney.
Right.
Whereas I would think there would be like a designated detention person, and
usually.
it probably would not be Mr. Feeney.
Right.
But all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember reading somewhere once too that the classrooms on Boy Meets World only have 9 desks in them or something like that, but it looks like a full classroom.
Yeah.
So he's in detention, and Cory says, "Why do we have to stay here? Just because I don't want to hear about this love stuff? Because I know it only leads to no good, and I know in your heart you agree with me."
Yeah, and he's referring to how Mr. Feeney was trying to teach Romeo and Juliet the love stuff while he was too busy listening to that game.
Right, and Feeney says, "What brings you to that conclusion, Mr. Matthews?" And Cory says, "Because you and I had dinner together last night." And Feeney says, "Really? I wasn't aware." And Cory says, "I had a chocolate pie and you had salad for 2 all by yourself." And Feeney looks up and says, How did you know that?" Very kind of shocked there. He goes on to explain, that he saw him, from the treehouse, that he's been staying in there. And Mr. Feeney scolds Cory not for peeking through his window or anything like that, but for thinking that he understands the world.
Oh, yeah, because this boy...
He's
just meeting
the world.
They're casual acquaintances.
Which is crazy because the next line, Mr. Feeney says, "Listen to me, boy. You are just now meeting the world."
He does not.
And then he says, "Oh, little boy, tiny boy, little boy, I love you." I'm just kidding. That's from a different show that's set in Philadelphia.
Where it's always sunny.
Yes. Of course, this is all part of the extended Philadelphia-verse of shows. Anyway, Mr. Feeney, though, what's interesting is Mr. Feeney ends up delivering sort of the emotional monologue at the end of the episode, which is such a staple of these 90s sitcoms of somebody giving a monologue.
Danny Tanner would always do one on Full House.
On The Wonder Years, another Savage TV show.
The narrator.
The narrator, which is the older version of Kevin Arnold, the main character, the little boy. And so, it's usually done by someone else. So in this case, it's the teacher here giving this monologue. And I'm going to read the monologue. I don't think you're going to cry at this monologue, but I know you cried at the Wonder Years one. I don't think you're going to cry at this one, but I know sometimes those ending monologues, they get you.
They get me.
So
I prefer the monologues on late night TV.
Not
as emotional.
Yes. But so Mr. Feeney, as he's kind of explaining, you don't know anything about the world. You don't want to just say you don't know nothing about the world. You're just a dumb kid. He says
he's much more eloquent.
Oh my God, I can't even do it justice here. But he says, "I live on the other side of the fence from you, Cory, and it's impossible not to face in your direction every once in a while and notice the people in the next yard. And through the years, I've got to know them. It is apparent that they are fine individuals, but their real strength comes from being a family. And do you know why they're a family, Cory? Because at one time, a man and a woman realized that they loved each other and pursued the unlimited potential of what may come from that love. And here you are. There is no greater aspiration than to have love in our lives, Mr. Matthews. Romeo knew it and died for it. Others know it and prepare salads. And those who don't... Oh, that part did get a laugh. There's a laugh track there, too. Yeah. Which is cool how they broke it up with a laugh track. And those who don't know it will sit in detention for the rest of their lives. This particular detention is over. And Cory's just sitting there frozen, just thinking about what he said. Gosh. Mr. Feeney.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack here. First of all, Mr. Feeney is like fake British, like Frasier.
A little bit,
and
yeah.
Madonna.
He's very dignified and smart.
Very dignified.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, this monologue is emotional, knowing what we know about Mr. Feeney, which is that he is single for most of the
he is
of the run of Boy Meets World. So given that context, we look at this quote and see that he's maybe yearning for something that he doesn't necessarily have.
Yeah.
Which makes me cry.
It's yeah.
But also, like we've mentioned before, it's kind of setting up this whole relationship between Cory and Topanga, which
really
develops
is.
as one of the quintessential romances of the millennial generation that
I'd say so.
People our age kind of grew up watching and thinking was normal and aspiring to, where you meet the love of your life in middle school and then stay together and get married in college. Woo. And
now some people do that,
Some people do that. I don't know that it's the best course of action for everyone or for most people, but it really becomes the gold standard of relationships as defined by this show.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's the best thing. I also, when I think about Romeo and Juliet, I remember it was standard reading for in ninth grade.
I learned it in ninth grade. I've taught it to ninth graders.
And we learned it. I learned it in ninth grade as well. I also knew it prior to that because of the Leonardo DiCaprio version of Romeo and Juliet. As I mentioned, very into Leonardo DiCaprio.
Me too.
But at the time, I remember thinking Romeo and Juliet is the be-all, end-all romance. It seems ideal in this perfect relationship.
But then you watch it again when you're older.
You watch it again when you're older, and you're if anybody had any sort of critical thinking, or they just took a moment, they were a little less impulsive, things might have turned out better for everyone. It doesn't seem as ideal as it did when I was
really
a kid.
Guys, grow up a little bit.
So it's a little weird to me that Mr. Feeney is holding it up and revering it in that way, where he does seem to be presenting it as this perfect relationship.
Yeah.
And I don't know that ends up great for Cory to internalize that.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, he's really just talking about love, though, too, and the love of a family also. But
That's
no, I know
true.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
We're into the final couple of scenes here. Back at the Matthews house, we see Cory is planning to move back in. We see him in his bedroom. He's playing what looks like Duck Hunt, the old NES game for Nintendo there. Eric comes home from the game. Cory did not go to the game. And his date didn't go well.
No.
She was wonderful. She was great, but
she was great at dating, and he was
not good.
Yeah.
Which is out of character for him, at least later on.
Yeah.
But
because he will be quite the ladies' man.
He will,
until he gets super dumb.
Yes. But then Cory sort of encourages Eric to call the girl, to call her, and try to make it work with her, which is cool.
Cory is telling Eric you're really cool. You're a really cool guy, and Eric's no, I'm not cool. Later on, Eric will see himself as very cool.
Oh yeah, and he's a good-looking guy. When there's a crime,
a crime breaks out, all the cute girls shout, "Get the good-looking guy." That's a theme song Eric makes up for himself in a future episode of Boy Meets World.
Exactly.
One of my favorite episodes of Boy Meets World.
It's a great episode.
Yeah.
One thing too, at the end of this episode too, Cory sits down to have some tea fake tea with Morgan. She wants to
His
have
little sister.
And I think that's funny because he's been ignoring her the whole episode. She's come by 2 other times and he's just written her off, and now he's realizing what it is to be that older sibling.
Yeah, because
and he sits down with her,
reflecting on what Mr. Feeney
learning
told him.
a lesson.
Yeah.
And reflecting on kind of how he approached everything with his brother and stuff like that. So and that's the end of the episode, except for they've got a credit scene. And in this credit scene, we're back at the cafeteria at school, and Mr. Feeney, you see him, and he asks the new teacher, Evelyn, to have dinner sometime at his house. And she says yes. And that's confusing, right, to all of us? Because it's didn't they just... isn't that what just happened? And she canceled? What's going on?
Cory and his friends thought that she had stood him up. And that's what Cory had witnessed the other night when he put that place sitting away.
Right. And then we see their conversation, and Mr. Feeney, talking to Evelyn, says, I'm quite the cook, And Evelyn says, really? And Feeney says, oh, yes. Just the other night, I prepared a lovely salad for my sister, but she I
like that you didn't try to say the word niçoise there.
Is that what that word is?
Yeah, salad niçoise.
Salad niçoise for my sister, but she had to cancel at the last moment. And Cory hears that as well. And he says, confused, Mr. Matthews? And Cory says, yes, I am, sir. And Feeney says, as it should be. And that's the end of the episode. So we find out it wasn't a date that was canceled. It was just some canceled plans with his sister.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the episode. So we talked about, as we were going through it, but, as far as the pilot goes, I think it does a lot of good things. I think that if it were to come out now, I probably wouldn't necessarily watch it, but we like watching shows that, our kid could potentially watch with us.
Yeah.
And this is definitely, it's a great show in that respect.
For sure.
Yeah. And it does a lot of good things that a pilot would do.
And it doesn't annoy me at all.
No.
Like a lot of shows do.
Yeah.
So, good for it.
Yeah, it's a cool show. This is a show too that I'm assuming that anybody listening to this has probably watched it, unless you're older than us.
Seen
I
at
don't
least
know.
An episode or two.
Yeah.
I would think.
What are some of your favorite episodes, Gia?
So I really like the episode where I think it's Topanga's Sweet 16, and Cory is helping his friend get closer to his dad, who's a professional wrestler, but also wants to go to Topanga's Sweet 16 birthday party.
The episode title is 16 Candles and 400-Pound Men.
Oh, okay.
Great episode title.
And Cory and Topanga end up dancing together in a wrestling ring at the end of it.
It's beautiful.
That's one of my favorites.
And it features Vader, the wrestler Vader.
Sure,
That's Frankie's father.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's one of my favorites. Another one is the one where Eric makes up that theme song for himself that we sang a little bit earlier. The one where he's trying to become like a meteorologist.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah. And
also
then,
Shallow Boy.
Oh yeah, Shallow. Is that the name of the episode?
That's the other one you like, yes.
Yeah, the other one where Eric is dating a girl who is a songwriter and writes a song about him called Shallow Boy. I guess I like the Eric-centric episodes a lot. Yeah.
My favorite episode, the title of the episode is The Thrilla in Phila. And that is where Cory joins the wrestling team because he wants to kind of make a name for himself. And what happens in that is he actually has a wrestling match against one of the bullies there. I think the guy who plays in the band Rilo Kiley. I forget which bully that is. It's not Frankie, but it's the other guy. Frankie is Ethan Suplee, so it's the other guy.
No, yeah.
He wrestles him in there. I feel like Vader makes an appearance in this one as well. The late Vader, the wrestler. But also this is one where the bully is. I love the bully Harley, who's like a 50s greaser of a bully. But this one, and I mentioned on the podcast before, is Griff, which is played by Adam Scott, and he's like, whereas the previous bully was like a biker tough guy, this one is like a cool smart guy. And the ending of this episode, I feel like it's like the credits scene. They all get detention for running a wrestling match in the cafeteria after school. But the ending, they're all in detention, and Cory's like, I hate detention. And Griff, which is Adam Scott, is like, you never had detention with Griff, though. And I don't remember how they introduce it, but it just... Somebody goes, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Goulet, who he'd been the Let's Get Ready to Rumble guy earlier for them, and he goes and he sings to them in detention, and it's just so silly. And I think that's only in the second season, and so they kind of get into that surreal kind of aspect of the series.
Was this
even
the
at
only
that
time
point,
that Adam Scott got to play a cool guy?
I think it is.
I think it is.
He definitely
Poor Adam Scott
was such a cool guy in that, and never gonna play a cool guy again.
Went on to play a bunch of nerds.
Oh, man. Sorry, Adam Scott.
And the guy from Rilo Kiley was like one of his lackeys, right?
Yeah. One of his lackeys. Gosh, those bullies made this show, man.
They did.
Oh, gosh. Boy Meets World. We've talked. This is so far right now. I think this is our longest episode because man, I love.
We had a lot to say about
Boy Meets World. And Boy Meets World it was a special request. I mentioned on the last week, but a special request from Adam, who had a birthday a few weeks ago now, and one of our listeners and my old college roommate, friend of the show, we're gonna do another show next week. I feel like Adam will like this one, and I feel like a lot of people will like this one because this is one of the best shows, and it's long running, and it's just fantastic. And it makes sense, too, because you know what? We covered Seinfeld last week.
Right.
Great episode. And next week, we're going to be talking about Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
I can hardly curb my enthusiasm for it.
Okay.
Got it? Did you get it?
I did get it.
Do you want me to explain it?
No, I do not.
Okay.
And we'll be talking specifically, so Curb Your Enthusiasm actually had there was like a special called Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is available on HBO. And that's not what we're going to cover. That came out before the series, but we're going to take a look, at which you should watch it. You should check it out. But we're going to take a look specific, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but we'll take a look specifically at episode 1 of season 1, which is titled The Pants Tent. And that's available if you have HBO, great, because you can watch it on that. But it's also available just if you have Amazon Prime. It's just on there. They've got a lot of these HBO shows right there on Amazon Prime, and they have the first few seasons. And so we'll be taking a look at Curb Your Enthusiasm next week. So if you haven't checked out that pilot in a while, or if you've never seen it, oh my gosh, you're in for a treat. It's good stuff.
For sure.
Yeah. And is that all we got to say about Boy Meets World?
I think that's it.
Oh my gosh. Well, hey guys, thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And look, if you could subscribe follow us on Facebook at YouMeAndTV, on Twitter at YouMeAndTVPod, on Instagram at YouMeAndTV Podcast. You could email us at YouMeAndTVPodcast@gmail.com and subscribe. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to us. That would be just awesome. And that's all we got. So, bye.
Bye.